You know, it's interesting right now because there's so many people talking about in the news the January 6th, the January 6th insurrection. I put that in quotes. But yet you discovered something where there's a connection between that and also Donald Trump. Share with us.
Yeah, well, let me set the stage with Donald Trump. And this is, listen, not political. It doesn't matter what you think, but this is about biblical. And here's the thing. First of all, there is a mystery to Donald Trump. There's a lot of mysteries, but one is that he's following, not that he knows it, but he's following the pattern, the template of the man called Jehu. And, you know, because God uses these things to reveal. When those of you who know the book I wrote called The Paradigm, that's where I start that, but it actually came true after I wrote it, and that's why in the Josiah Manifesto, you'll see what's happened since. Well, just to set that stage, so Jehu was a wild guy, unpredictable. You never knew what he was going to do next. Donald Trump. You never knew what he was going to say. He was a fighter. He fought with everybody. Donald Trump fights with everybody. And he is unlikely man, but he's used by God. We don't even know where he was with God. We don't know that, but he was used by God, Jehu, to actually, when the nation was falling from God, to kind of come at that moment. So he begins a race to the throne on his chariot. The Bible says he drove his chariot, his race like a madman. And so Donald Trump begins his race to the White House. When Jehu, as he's making his race, he makes an alliance with the religious conservatives of the land. They back him up. And he actually and so did Trump. And he actually makes an alliance, Jehu, with one man, a partnership, who's a religious man, and so did Donald Trump. And then when he gets to almost to get to the throne, the last obstacle, it's a showdown with him and the nation's former first lady. So what happened with Donald Trump? Same thing. Everybody said Hillary Clinton was going to win, but the paradigm from the Bible said that the Jehu was going to prevail, and the former first lady is going to have a political fall at the very least. And so that's exactly what happened. Then Jehu heads to the capital city with an agenda. You know what his agenda was? To drain the swamp, to kind of cleanse the thing. Well, so did Trump. But when Jehu gets to the city, he sees a temple of Baal where they're sacrificing children. And so Jehu has it destroyed, has the temple. So there's a principle that when Jehu rises, the temple of Baal falls. Well, you know what? There actually existed a temple of Baal, has existed since ancient times, still was standing in the Middle East. And you know what? Donald Trump began his rise in 2015 in the summer. In the summer of 2015, the ancient temple of Baal falls to the earth, collapses. The ancient temple of Baal. When Jehu rises, the temple of Baal falls. Now, this is actually going to be prophetic to what is going to happen in the time of Donald Trump and then after Donald Trump. And so here's the other side of it. That's how his time began. Jehu begins his rise with the temple of Baal. Well, Donald Trump's presidency also, that term ended with a replaying of something, because there's a template in the Bible where Jehu calls people together to the capital city. They come and they gather around a great Capitol building. And as they are gathered around so that happened with Donald Trump, January 6th. They gather around the Capitol building. Then something happened. There are proceedings going on in the Capitol building of Jehu, and so with Trump. And then the men of Jehu actually storm the building. They enter the building while the proceedings are going on. So January 6th. Now there's so much to this, but I'll say just one thing. At the end of that week of January 6th, the Capitol Police announced, they made headlines, we've arrested on site, and they gave the number, 80 people. They arrested 80 people. Go to the Bible, and it gives the number of those, it cites numbers of those who entered the building, and it says Shmonim Ish. The Hebrew word means 80 people, same exact number. So so Trump's beginning and end are both linked to the Temple of Baal, and that's going to be prophetic for what happened after his term.
Yeah, I mean, how do we come up with this stuff? I mean, it's amazing to me the corresponding numbers and dates, and just it reminds me of the consistency and then just the nature of God, that God does not change. His nature of holding people accountable is there, but it's always mixed with grace. But also to see the way that, again, Jehu, this very enigmatic figure in the Bible, for the book of 1 Kings, you're like, where's this guy coming from? And that God used him. I thought that was the amazing parallel, was that God used an unlikely person in the Bible to bring about his will. And in the same way, we see how God was working in modern times. But you bring up in the book this idea of a strange object from the Middle East. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, one of the things is that, now think about this, and this is, again, I started it in the paradigm, but it came true after, and that's why it's in the Josiah Manifesto, and that is this. Jehu is linked to the pulling down, overturning of the Temple of Baal. The Temple of Baal was the vessel in which they killed their children. They killed their babies, Well, today, the vessel that has allowed the killing of babies was Roe versus Wade. That's the first vessel. Well, so what it's saying right there is that this modern day Jehu, Trump, is going to be used to overturn Roe versus Wade. And listen, whatever we think of Donald Trump, more than any other president, he was used to actually pull that down by the 3 Supreme Court justices he put in, particularly the last one, which was the deciding vote. So the thing is that, so it's like this war, the template is the war between Jehu and the Temple of Baal. Well, interesting, because when Donald Trump was rising to power, when just before the election, in New York, a strange object appears. And the object that appears is the Arch of Baal from the Temple of Baal that fell when Donald Trump began his rise. It now makes an appearance in New York, his backyard. And I went down there to witness it. We filmed it. I mean, they had a ceremony in New York. It was on City Hall. They had leaders of New York praising this whole thing. They had a sign that said Temple of Baal. We recorded this. We actually put it on those videos so people could actually see it for themselves. So they unveiled it. They played the music of Baal. And so it's a sign of this war between, Baal, the spirit of Baal in America, and this Jehu, the spirit that's going against it, and also the killing of children. There's a war over this right now. And there was a war over it then. But here's the thing. Later on, when Donald Trump begins nominating those people who are going to pull down Roe versus Wade, they're going to overturn this Temple of Baal. When he did Kavanaugh, all hell broke loose on Capitol Hill, if you remember. It was because it was over this. It was over the killing of they knew what was at stake. But here's the weird thing. When they were having those hearings on Capitol Hill and all hell was breaking loose over this, an object appears in Washington, D.C. It's the same object. The Arch of Baal now appears in Washington, D.C. in front on the National Mall facing the Capitol building. So it's almost like, 2001, a space like this monolith, but it's like the war between Jehu, and we're still in that war. There are real spiritual forces, and we're in that war right now.
Yeah, if you're watching this, I hope you realize that we are absolutely in a spiritual. Ephesians 6:12, says that exact thing, that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against all these principalities and powers and other spiritual beings and wicked spiritual beings in the heavenlies. To see this come back after so long, and to see some of the ways our culture are going, we're shocked, but yet we're not shocked. But one of the things, if you can at the moment, you mentioned filming this, but also one of the things that we haven't really talked about yet was give a background to, not only do you have the book, but you have the DVD series where you show some of these things.
Yeah, this is what's really exclusive, and you cannot get this. This is the Josiah Manifesto Uncensored. 8 DVD, 1-hour DVD albums where I'm opening this up. Not only the mystery, but things I could not put in the book. So they're nowhere else on earth. There are entire other mysteries as well that are nowhere else on earth. And you also see it. You're going to see the images of this, we're talking about. You're going to see it, and you're going to see it in real time. And not only that, it has captured prophetic events, manifestations, where actually you're going to see it on film, where it actually changed the course of America, but you'll see the actual prophetic event. You'll see what I just said. You're going to see the actually appearance of that arch in New York and the unveiling of it and the ceremony around it. You're going to see on this. So this is exclusive. You cannot get it on Amazon. You cannot get it on a lot. You cannot get it in any bookstore. This is very exclusive. You're going to be blessed. You're going to get so much in this thing, and you can show others as well. It is the Josiah Manifesto Uncensored 8 DVD album.
Jonathan, in the book, we want to get right back into it because there's so much here to cover. You talk about the child of the Nile. Give us the information background on that.
Yeah, there is a principle in the Bible, and it goes back to Moses. And that is, remember, Moses, lived at the time. He was born during the first war against the little children. The first known war that we have, where Egypt was committing mass infanticide. They were throwing the male babies into the Nile. And one of those babies at that time was Moses. He was born right in the middle of it, in the middle of the slaughter. He's put in the Nile too, but he's put in a basket. And he floats down, and of course the princess of Egypt takes him, sees him, takes him, and he becomes the son of the in the house of the Pharaoh. He ends up being the one who will break the power of Egypt. He will end up breaking the power that almost killed him, that killed all those Hebrew babies. In fact, it's interesting when for looking, in Bible study, interesting because what was the first plague? The first plague was the Nile turns blood red. Well, that goes back to when they killed the babies there, in that Nile. But also, what was the last plague? It was the death of the sons of Egypt, because they killed the sons of Israel. So it's amazing. So it all goes back, and you have one of those. You have the baby actually now who's leading all this. And so the thing is that the principle is that a child born in the midst of the slaughter will survive, does not get killed, will become one who is used later on to overturn the very powers that brought the death. And so could there be a child of the Nile to America? And the answer is yes. And this is a baby who was born in the midst of that crucial 3-year period when the slaughter began. And her name was Amy. She would later on become a Supreme Court Justice, Amy Coney Barrett. She would end up, actually, let me say that. When she was born, Roe versus Wade was actually in the Supreme Court. So she's already linked to the time of the Supreme Court. It's there. When she was born, it was right in between the two hearings of Roe versus Wade, right in the midst of it. And so she was destined to go to the Supreme Court, and she would be the one vote, because Roe versus Wade, it was one vote that overturned it. One vote. It was her vote, because she was the last one that Trump would nominate. And so she's the American child of the Nile. And you know what? Here's the thing. Think about this as well. When did she cast that deciding vote? She did it in her year of Jubilee. It was her 50th year when she cast the vote. And when it was overturned, when the ruling was then made known in June, she was 50 years old. There's no accidents. So all this, even that, you have a Jehu replaying, you have a child of the Nile replaying, and you have more than that.
Let's step back for a minute, because obviously God, you use the word, she's destined, which is a good word. And so God, what it shows us is that God is working not only behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, but why is God doing all this and bringing it to light? What's his whole goal here?
Well, one, God is the God of history. He's the God of prophecy. He's the God of human events. And so he's in it. The God of the Bible is alive and well. In the Bible, you see it. It says this happened, he prophesied this happened, this all fell together. Well, it's still happening. What we're talking, the phenomenon we're talking about, I've been blessed to have any part in writing on it. It's the same phenomenon that you see in the Bible, except it's saying that he's real. Except you don't have a Bible now necessarily saying, okay, look here. But God is real. And so one thing is saying God is in charge. God is on the throne. And God's ways will be done. And he'll even work even through the evil of man and all that man does. His will will still be working out in the end. So it's telling you the reality of God, of all things. And when you see things like Jehu, that's giving you an idea of where we are, like what the issues are, because same issues. When you see the child of the Nile, there's an Egypt part here too. There's a temple of Baal. So it's giving us revelation of where we are and where we're going.
Yeah, amen. So very well said. And at least for 50 years, people are praying. As soon as Roe v. Wade came in 1973, Christians recognizing this and others were praying against this. Talk about the Dobbs versus Jackson, lawsuit,
Yeah.
and how that was part of the mystery.
Yeah, well, Roe versus Wade, here's the thing. It actually did not begin in 73. You know when it began? 1970, the same year. So, and not only that, it began when this woman went to a lawyer and they had the first meeting, and it was in late January. So go fast forward, late January. What's the Jubilee? Late January 2020. That's when the plague came. So it was Roe versus Wade, and then it became a lawsuit and was filed in March of that year. March is when everything fell. So even that is part of it. So but the Jubilee is not just about returning. It's about redemption. and it's about nullification. Okay, so what happens is that just as it happened through a case, Roe versus Wade, it was a case on the state level, then it was sent to the Supreme Court. So there comes another case in the year of Jubilee of all these things in 2020. Another case is also in the same place as Roe versus Wade and is sent to the Supreme Court. Roe versus Wade was sent to the Supreme Court in 2020 in the summer. Dobbs versus Jackson was sent to the Supreme Court. In 1970 was Roe versus Wade. 50 years later, 2020, Dobbs versus Jackson is sent to the court in the summer, 50 years to the same time, same everything. And it's going to follow this amazing pattern. This is now the redemption of the Jubilee.
Yeah, wow. I mean, here we are. It's, this has been a very fun program because, again, we're just scratching the surface. And so if you've been intrigued by this or you're really shocked by it, again, there's more information certainly in the book and the DVDs that you're going to want to see. So, there's two things in the calendar of Israel or the Hebrew calendar. You have different months. Certainly, they're named different than our calendar, but you have Adar 13 and Sivan 23. Talk about that.
Yeah. The Adar 13. That's the day in the Bible that's linked to. If you'll find it in the book of Esther, when Haman comes up he wants to destroy the Jewish people. He comes up with a decree, and he comes up with a date. The date for the decree, and the date to kill the Jews is Adar 13. So this is the day of a decree is going to be issued to bring death and destruction to multitudes. Okay, and then on the Hebrew calendar, we wouldn't know because it's not our calendar in America, but it's the 13th day of the 12th month. 13th day of the 12th month is day of an evil decree to bring death and destruction. Roe versus Wade was heard before the Supreme Court. The day of its hearing was, and it would go for, this would bring the vote, this would bring the passage, was December 13th. That's the 13th day of the 12th month of America. And so that's the day in the Bible that's linked to an evil decree that to bring death and destruction. Okay, so that's the first. But there's another decree in the book of Esther, and that's the reverse decree. It's the it's the decree that's going to nullify the death and destruction decree. It's going to overturn it, it's going to nullify it, and that's the decree that was issued by Mordecai. So you got it, and he issued it to nullify what Haman did, the death and destruction decree. Okay, so it's the second decree. When was it? When did it go forth? Well, the Bible says it went forth, it was done on Sivan 23. This is the 23rd day of Sivan. Okay, now the amazing thing is when you read Esther, you're reading that decree follows the same path as the first decree. It undoes everything. Well, so Dobbs would follow the same path as Roe versus Wade, would go through the same everything. So just like that. But the day, so it was sent to the Supreme Court on June 15, 2020. June 15. All right. Anything significant? On the Bible's calendar, it was the 23rd of Sivan. It was the day of the decree that will nullify the decree of death and destruction. And so that's exactly what it did. In fact, let me tell you something, Mano. On that day, this is so much so that day is actually ordained in the Jewish year for Jewish people to pray against evil decrees for them to be nullified. And so Jewish people are praying all around in America and around the world to nullify evil decree as this next decree, that's of Sivan 23, is going forth to nullify the evil decree.
If you're watching today, I hope you're blown away by all of this, because to me, it shows again the God of history. And we're gonna take a little break here where you can see how to get Jonathan's book and DVD, and again exploring in this in much more detail.
Possible that the events unfolding in our times are part of an ancient mystery? Does this mystery reveal what the future holds? And does it give us the key, the answer, even a blueprint to survive, to stand, and to prevail in view of what is coming in the days ahead? After 7 explosive New York Times bestsellers, Jonathan Cahn now releases his newest blockbuster, The Josiah Manifesto, the ancient mystery and guide for the end times. The Josiah Manifesto opens up the stunning mysteries that lie behind what is taking place before our eyes. The 3,000-year calendar that determined the most dramatic events of our lives. From COVID-19 to the Supreme Court and Capitol Hill, the ancient object that destroyed an ancient city and that appeared in Washington, D.C. The Island of Mysteries, the House of Fallen Children, the Heavenly Court, the Child of the Nile, the Agents of Heaven on Earth, and much, much more. The Josiah Manifesto will take you on a prophetic journey from a Caribbean island to Washington, D.C., to a desert mountain, to the gates of America, to uncover an ancient puzzle that lies behind the events that have altered our lives. What does the future hold? Is there hope? And could these mysteries give you the key to what you need to know to survive and to prevail in the days to come? It will all be revealed in the Josiah Manifesto, the ancient mystery and guide for the end times, the book you can't afford not to read. Available wherever books are sold.